All right, more on our top story now in Syria. Mark Fitzpatrick is a chemical weapons specialist. He joins us live from London. Mark, thanks for being with us. We've seen this video then of people displaying pretty distressing symptoms. The doctor treating them says that he thought he was dealing with the results of a chemical attack. So just how credible are these claims that chemical weapons have been used?
The claims of chemical weapon use cannot be totally confirmed, but the evidence of photography, videos of victims who appear to have suffered from chemical weapons attacks is corroborated by evidence of byproducts of sarin in the soil of the place where one of the attacks allegedly took place. Now, these two streams of evidence themselves don't conclusively prove that chemical weapons were used, but it's prima facie evidence. What's in question is confirmation of who ordered the attack. Was it Syrian government forces, or was it somebody else? And if it was Syrian government forces, was it at the direction of the central authorities? That should be determined before anyone uses this evidence as a basis for a military intervention.
You mentioned sarin, which I understand is a nerve gas, whatever that means. Perhaps you'd explain how much of it would need to be used to trigger the kind of symptoms that we can see in this video.
Well, a very small amount of sarin will cause the kind of symptoms of loss of muscle control, tearing down the membranes of the body, causing the foaming of the mouth and so forth. If just a few droplets of sarin were inhaled, that would cause instantaneous death. So in this case, it was a very relatively small dosage because some of the people were still alive. The number of deaths was quite small in terms of most chemical weapons attacks. You think of the Iraqi use of chemical weapons against their own people and against Iran, much higher numbers. So the number of chemical weapon canisters used was very small.
So we're talking about a tiny amount that's been released into the atmosphere here to cause these sort of symptoms. How on earth would you go about investigating or gathering evidence then to say definitively what the agent was, how much of it was used, and who used it?
Well, the agent itself is probably the evidence that is so far most conclusive because of the soil samples that have been gathered and because of the witnesses of the victims and the footage that has been filmed. Then where it was used is very important to determine. There was the eyewitness story account of somebody who saw a artillery shell hitting the building where the poor family suffered from the after effects. So that's some corroboration. But how one actually determines who used it is much harder to tell. It would be useful to have some fragment of the artillery shell that was used, which could determine maybe in whose hands it was. But was it authorized or not? That's going to be a judgment call.
Yeah. So much I want to ask you, so little time in which to do so. If I could ask you to be brief here, and I'll lump two questions in together. How long does this stuff stay around in the atmosphere once it's been released? How long do surfaces stay contaminated if this stuff has been released? And Syria, by its own admission, has big stockpiles of chemical weapons. If President Obama's red line has been crossed, to what extent do you feel that any military intervention might be aimed at securing that stockpile?
Sarin evaporates as quickly as water. If it's on one's clothing, it will stay a little bit longer, but within a matter of hours, short hours, it will evaporate. If it's used in heavy amounts, then some of it will be residual in the soil. In this case, that's not what happened. President Obama, first of all, had used a red line of, he said, a whole lot of chemical weapons. Then he stopped using that kind of a number metric. But that's important, how much was used. If you're going to trigger a military intervention with all the consequences and the unknown exit path, probably it should be some large use. Perhaps there can be a small-scale response, though, to what was a small-scale apparent use by the Syrian government forces. I think those are the kind of slicing of policy choices that Obama will be facing.
Mark, I've learned so much from our conversation. Many thanks indeed for sharing your expertise with us. Mark Fitzpatrick, a chemical weapons specialist, live in London.